Hey guys, this is Aaron Farmer with My Sugar-Free Journey, and here is day 17 of the 28-day Ketogenic Weight Loss Challenge. Today we're going to talk about the effect of the ketogenic diet on cholesterol. So once upon a time, we were either hunters or gatherers. Hunters either killed their food or fished it out of the ocean, and our liver evolved to handle energy from that. If food was in short supply, the liver would convert the energy from dietary fat into ketones. Ketones could be burned for fuel by your cell's mitochondria or other organs as your body needed. When food was plentiful, excess energy was converted to cholesterol and stored as fat until it was needed again in times of famine. They didn't eat carbs, and they got along just fine without them, and that's the basis of any low-carb diet. Any of us can do just fine without any carbohydrates in our diet. And then there were the gatherers. The gatherers got their food from what they could either gather or grow. They were agriculturalists. If food was scarce, all the glucose from the food was immediately taken up by the liver for energy. If food was abundant, blood sugar would rise, provoking insulin to drive energy into fat cells for storage. This is the basis of a vegetarian diet or a vegan diet, and it can be a very perfectly healthy way to eat. The problem is when we begin to combine these two types of diets and eat them both at the same time. So there are two different ways the liver can convert food to energy, but when we give it both types of food, both fat and carbohydrates, we overload these metabolic pathways and cause damage. And of course, most of us do this for every meal. We eat meat and potatoes. We eat all of our meat with bread on the side, or a hamburger with a bun. So we're eating fat and carbohydrates together with every meal, and our livers just didn't evolve to handle that type of abuse. And so keep in mind that most foods, with one exception, that exception being sugar and actually milk is a small exception, are either fat or carbohydrates. Meat, fish, and poultry, fat. Grains, roots, potatoes, carbohydrates. Fruits that have fat, like olives, avocados, or coconut, have minimal carbohydrates. Nuts have fat and a little carbs, but lots of fiber to offset the effect of carbohydrates on your body. Milk is a small exception, but keep in mind that we didn't drink milk until the advent of agriculture. So as heart disease and other health issues began to rise, the race was on for scientists to figure out what was going on. There were two main stories that were beginning to form. The first came from John Yudkin, a British nutritionist that was studying the nature of chronic diseases. He determined that the consumption of sucrose correlated with heart problems and other health issues. He published his findings in the book Pure, White, and Deadly in 1972. He followed up with numerous papers detailing how sugar consumption led to heart disease, diabetes, GI disease, eye disease, other inflammatory issues. And around the same time, Ansel Keys was studying the same issue, but he was telling the world that it was fat that was causing these same issues. He issued his famous 7-country study that correlated fat consumption with heart disease. You probably remember the fallout from the study in low-fat foods and heart-healthy grains. But there were a few problems with the study. Number one, he studied 22 countries, but only cherry-picked the 7 that best correlated with his hypothesis. When all the data was considered, the links between fat and heart disease are not correlated well at all. He also didn't include native tribes like the Inuit that had diets consisting almost entirely of fat and had almost no instance of heart disease. The role of fat in heart disease is complicated because at the time, people who ate fat probably also ate a lot of trans fat, something we now know without a doubt causes heart trouble. And at the end of the graph is Italy and Japan. They eat the least amount of dietary fat, but they also eat the least amount of sugar. So is it the absence of fat or sugar that causes the reduced rates of heart disease? Through a way too complicated series of twists and turns to talk about here, but if you do want to find out about exactly how this happened, you can read Gary Taubes' book, Good Calories, Bad Calories, or you can read Nina Teicholz's book, Big Fat Surprise. Both fantastic books that really go over what exactly is happening here. Ansel Keys won out. So his story that fat is what causes heart disease and all these other issues won, and the U.S. adopted the stance that low-fat diets were healthier for America. And that's when the trouble really started. The big finding of the day is that eating dietary fat led to increased LDL, the so-called bad cholesterol. This is really the basis for the idea that dietary fat causes heart disease. What no one knew at the time is that there are actually two types of LDL particles. You had the large buoyant LDL, or LDLA, and you also had small dense LDL particles. These are LDLB, or it's sometimes called VLDL. LDLA floats, causes no cardiovascular issues, but the LDLB is dense enough to sink and small enough to fit between the blood vessel cells, which leads to plaque buildup on the vessel walls. While it's true that dietary fat will raise LDL, it raises LDLA, which causes no issues. So what raises LDLB? Carbs. So we'll be back tomorrow with more information.